She gave him everything, because he gave her nothing. Let that truth sink in. She walked away from the man who cherished her soul, and ran headfirst toward the one who didn't even look twice. She ignored the message you crafted with trembling hands. She left the one who made her feel seen, and instead, she chased a ghost, a shadow, a silence, a man who never even tried to hold her hand, let alone her heart. And you're left wondering, why? Why does she abandon the man who stayed for the one who never shows up? This isn't just heartbreak. This is a glitch in the human blueprint, a betrayal embedded in her biology, a pattern so ancient, so deeply woven into the emotional fabric of her nervous system that even she doesn't realize she's following it. You thought love was showing up. You believed it was about presence, about being consistent, loyal, dependable. But for her, comfort wasn't love. Comfort was invisibility. You offered her stability, what she claimed she always wanted. And yet, she felt nothing. Not because you were wrong, but because she was wired to chase the storm, not rest in the calm. You were the haven, he was the hunt, and her mind was addicted to the chase. You see, she didn't reject you because you weren't enough. She rejected you because you were too available, too secure, too real. And the tragedy is, she doesn't even know she's doing it. What she called chemistry was never about connection. It was chaos, emotional turbulence wrapped in romantic fantasy. The thrill wasn't in being loved. The thrill was in earning it. So when you gave her your heart without hesitation, she didn't feel chosen. She felt bored. This is the story of why women run toward men who disappear, and away from the ones who stay. And it's not because you failed. It's because her subconscious craves a different kind of danger. Not by choice, by conditioning. This isn't about blame. This is about clarity. It's about the war between her childhood wounds and your adult love. You were the man who stayed, and for that, you became the one she stopped seeing. Let's pull back the curtain. She said she wanted a man who listens, who stays, who understands her chaos and offers calm. So you became that man. You were her peace, her quiet place, her consistency. But the truth is brutal. Peace doesn't excite her. Calm doesn't captivate her. Stillness doesn't send dopamine through her bloodstream. Because what no one told you is this: her nervous system wasn't built in peace. It was built in tension. When she was young, love came with conditions. It came late. It came after yelling, after silence. It came with a raised eyebrow, a delayed text, a closed door. That was her first language. Not love, but unpredictability. So now, as an adult, when she meets a man who is gentle, open, and emotionally honest, her entire body doesn't say, "This is love." It says, "This is unfamiliar." And the unfamiliar feels fake. So what does she do? She chases what feels familiar. She chases absence. She chases rejection. She chases the man who makes her bleed just enough to feel alive. You gave her your time, your tenderness, your truth. He gave her silence, and it was his silence that echoed in her chest. Not your words, not your presence, but the void that he left behind, that became her obsession. And here's the twist. The more you gave, the more invisible you became. The more he withheld, the more unforgettable he seemed. Why? Because female desire isn't triggered by consistency. It's triggered by mystery. Not clarity, but confusion. Not certainty, but the pulse-pounding question. Does he want me or not? You were her home, but she didn't want a home. She wanted a battlefield, because only in emotional combat could she feel something real. Her addiction wasn't to him. It was to the uncertainty he created. That intoxicating cocktail of hope and doubt. The adrenaline of unpredictability. The longing that keeps her up at 3 a.m., checking her phone, rereading the last message that said nothing but still meant everything. And you, so present, so available, never gave her the space to spiral. So she left. Not because you failed, but because you didn't trigger her anxiety. Because in her world, the man who confuses her becomes the man she can't stop thinking about. It's not romantic, it's biological. It's trauma. And it runs deeper than love ever could. Let's go deeper now, beneath the confusion, beneath the heartbreak, beneath the "I don't know why I can't stop thinking about him." There's something more powerful at play here. Trauma. Not the obvious kind that leaves bruises you can see, but the invisible kind. The kind that rewires her nervous system, that teaches her, to be loved, I must suffer first. So when you gave her affection without demand, love without punishment, presence without drama, her body didn't interpret it as safety. It interpreted it as a threat to everything she's been taught to believe about love. Let's rewind the story. Her father was distant, cold, silent. He never looked up when she walked into the room. She learned that love meant walking on eggshells. That attention came only after she screamed or cried. That affection had to be earned with effort. That closeness was something to beg for, not something freely given. And so when you entered her life, open, kind, honest, her subconscious screamed, This doesn't feel like love." Because to her, love hurts, love disappears, love withholds. And that's why she left the man who loved her, for the man who left her hanging. Not because he was better, not because he was stronger, but because his chaos felt like home. You thought she wanted peace, but she had been trained by trauma, by conditioning, by a lifetime of emotional whiplash, that peace equals boredom. You didn't do anything wrong, but in offering her stability, you interrupted the only pattern she had ever known. The cycle of being ignored, getting just enough attention to feel hopeful, then being left again to wonder what she did wrong. You gave her love, he gave her withdrawal, and she mistook the pain of his absence for the passion of his desire. That's the trauma bond, a loop where suffering becomes proof of love, where she doesn't feel alive unless she's hurting. You didn't smother her. You didn't overwhelm her. You disrupted her addiction, an addiction to adrenaline, to cortisol, to the chemical cocktail that floods her body when love feels uncertain and painful. She didn't fall in love with him. She fell in love with the emotional reenactment of chasing someone who would never choose her fully. And you were too soft, too steady, too safe. You didn't make her bleed. And so she couldn't feel, not because you were boring, but because you were not broken enough to match her pain. Let's talk about you now, the man who stayed, the man who showed up when no one else did, the one who remembered the name of her childhood dog, her favorite flower, and the time she almost gave up on herself. You were the one who saw her clearly, even when she was blurry to herself, and still, she left. Not for someone better, but for someone who gave her nothing. And you're left there, alone, bleeding from wounds you didn't deserve, asking yourself the most painful question of all. Why wasn't I enough? But let me tell you something you need to hear. You were enough. In fact, you were more than enough. You were too whole for someone who only knows how to survive in fragments. You were too emotionally available for someone whose system is addicted to uncertainty. You were too real for someone who's been taught that love only comes when she performs, chases, and suffers. You weren't too soft. You weren't too sensitive. You were simply the medicine, and she wasn't ready to heal. You see, love is easy to wish for, but it's terrifying to receive when your entire nervous system has been programmed for withdrawal. So the more you gave, the more restless she became. The more you stayed, the more she looked for the exit. Not because she didn't love you, but because she didn't know how to feel love that didn't come with pain. And the irony is cruel. The man who ignores her vanishes, confuses her. He becomes her obsession because he reawakens the wound. He stirs the ache. He forces her to earn his attention, to replay the old story that love must be fought for. He makes her anxious, and in her world, anxiety feels like connection. Meanwhile, you're over here, planning dates, sending good morning texts, being thoughtful, grounded, real, and she says, "It's too much." But what she really means is, it's too unfamiliar, it's too safe, it's too still. You took away the guessing game. You silenced the drama. You gave her love without making her bleed for it. And that's why she couldn't feel it. Because to someone raised on chaos, peace feels like silence, and silence feels like abandonment. It's not your fault. It never was. But now, it's your responsibility to stop bleeding for women who crave the pain more than the healing. You weren't forgettable. You were just too real to be romanticized by someone still trapped in her wounds. Let's now unravel the one thing you were never taught. Mystery is not manipulation, it's magnetism. You believed that by being transparent, open, and honest, you were building intimacy. And you were. But not the kind she was ready to feel. Because while you were busy opening your soul to her, he was staying silent. And that silence? It drove her wild. Why? Because the feminine mind is wired to chase what it can't fully grasp. It's not your vulnerability she's addicted to. It's the tension of uncertainty, the pursuit of the unanswered, the thrill of decoding the unreadable. You showed her your heart on day one. He kept his locked behind 10 doors. And even though she said she wanted connection, her biology whispered otherwise. It whispered, "The man who leaves me wondering is the man who moves my soul." So when you poured out your truth, she listened. Then, she felt nothing. But when he said nothing, she felt everything. She spun in circles trying to understand him. She stared at the screen, waiting for a reply. She dissected every delayed text like it held a hidden message. And that became her addiction. Not him, the mystery of him. You gave her peace. He gave her psychological polarity. You were an open book. She read every word, put it down, and never picked it up again. But he was a riddle, a puzzle that refused to be solved. And that puzzle, it haunted her. You thought connection was created by sharing everything. But the truth is, desire is born in what's withheld. The feminine doesn't want full control. She wants to orbit something she can't fully possess. And when you made yourself fully available, emotionally, mentally, physically, she didn't feel grateful. She felt numb. Because scarcity creates value. Distance creates desire. Mystery creates meaning. She doesn't remember the man who stayed. She remembers the one who vanished just enough to leave a void. And that void became her fantasy. So no, you weren't boring. You were just too easy to hold. And the feminine isn't built to treasure what she doesn't have to reach for. So, now you're standing here, wounded, confused, heart wide open, and empty. You gave her everything she asked for, attention, affection, devotion, and still, she walked away. Not for someone stronger, not for someone kinder, but for someone who barely noticed her existence. And now you wonder, should I change? Should I harden? Should I become cold to be wanted? No. You don't need to become cruel. You don't need to mimic the emotionally distant man who broke her. You need to become anchored. A man so rooted in himself, so grounded in purpose, that her chaos dances around you but never shakes your center. A man who isn't afraid of love, but who doesn't hand it over without weight. You must become the man whose presence is not taken for granted, because it is no longer available on demand. Let her earn it. Let her miss it. Let her wonder, just a little. Because what she craves isn't cruelty. It's the feeling of earning your depth, not being handed it on day one. Your love should feel like a sunrise, not a spotlight. It should rise slowly, patiently, quietly, until its warmth is undeniable. You were taught to be nice, to be available, to be open. But no one told you obedience doesn't inspire desire. She doesn't want a man she can move. She wants a man she can't unsee because he moves on his own. So stop explaining yourself. Stop giving her everything before she's earned anything. Start becoming the version of you that doesn't need to be desired. Because the men who are most desired never ask to be. Let your presence be a reward. Let your absence carry weight. Let your boundaries shape your value. Because she won't remember the one who chased her. She will remember the one whose silence made her feel, whose distance made her yearn, whose mystery made her ache. Not because he was playing games, but because he was too full within himself to be consumed by anyone else. You were not too much. You were simply too easy to win. Now it's time to stop bleeding for women who only understand love through pain, and become the man who can't be forgotten. Not because he's cruel, but because he's undeniably grounded. Because you don't need to disappear to become powerful. You just need to stop giving everything away for free. Let her orbit you. Let her crave the weight of your presence. Let her climb the mountain to reach you. You are not the backup plan. You are not the fallback. You are the man she will remember in silence, long after the noise has faded.